President Trump winning big at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, while the fake news mainstream media continues to embarrass itself. All right, this is great. I'm going to read you 3 different takes from 3 different media outlets on Donald Trump's very successful visit to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. So first, let's go to the Daily Caller. Now, the Daily Caller is perceived as a right-wing outlet, but I find them very objective, and I find their reporters do some very good work in terms of investigative journalism. Luke Rosiak over at the Caller has been doing outstanding work, as has Chuck Ross, on the stroke page emails and various improprieties surrounding DOJ, FBI, and Mueller's investigation. So here's a report from the Daily Caller about the Trump's visit over to Davos, about the president's visit over to Davos, titled "America First." European CEOs go one by one to tell Trump they are investing billions back in the U.S. In no way, shape, or form can that be a bad thing. Foreign companies see Trump's economic policies as positive, and they're putting more money into the United States, thereby hiring more Americans, increasing their U.S. stock prices, people's investments values are rising, pension funds are worth more. Only good is coming from it. Economy up, unemployment down. Very simple. About the economy, stupid, jobs, jobs, jobs. Messages the Republicans used to throw out there. It worked very well. We got away from it. We're getting back to it. All good stuff. So let me read you a paragraph from the Caller story, and then we're going to contrast it against the Washington Post and CNN. And you'll see how far they've fallen. In the Caller story, it says, quote, "In a stunning moment, one by one, European titans of industry from companies like Adidas, Siemens, and Bayer went around the table to thank Trump for the passage of tax cuts and easing corporate tax burdens. Almost every CEO had a new U.S.-based investment or strategic business to announce." Only good, right? You've got big companies, Adidas, Siemens, the electronics manufacturer, Bayer, aspirin, and very big European companies are now saying we're going to make new investments in the U.S. More importantly, new business units will come into the U.S. We're growing I tell you about this all the time, our research and development. We're putting more money into R&D. We're developing new products. And when you put more money into U.S. operations, you're a European company, you put more money into R&D, more money into U.S. operations, you grow your business and you launch new business units. You know what that means? One word: jobs. And it's great for our economy. It means more jobs. And it's great. So, of course, the liberal media had to do their best to downplay this. So let's go over to the Washington Post. Well, the Washington Post headline is going to make you laugh. Trump wins over global elites at Davos. All it took was a $1.5 trillion tax cut. So let's read a couple of pieces from this story. Davos, Switzerland. Washington Post. Donald Trump may have finally gained entry into the exclusive club of the corporate elites he has long scorned, and which has scorned him. They start the story by claiming that Trump hates these people and they hate him, but now he's finally in the club. And why is he in the club? All it took was a $1.5 trillion tax cut and a much more hands-off approach toward regulating companies for business leaders to embrace him. Now, could it possibly be that that's not the case? Could it possibly be that these very, very smart CEOs from very successful companies like Adidas, like Siemens, like Bayer, legacy icon brands that are run incredibly well, they're very smart people, business geniuses running these companies, can it be that they look at the change in policy from Obama to Trump and they realize it's good for business? Maybe because Obama was a business ignoramus, an economic and financial ignoramus. He was a moron, and his policies were designed for one reason: to crush the private sector and to drive the world toward globalism and socialism. He didn't want a strong private sector. Obama hated a strong private sector because it cut into his globalist socialist leanings. So these titans of industry look at the U.S. now with less regulation, a lower corporate tax rate, and they say, we want to spend our money there. We're not going to spend it in Europe, where in some places the marginal tax rates are 60, 70%. We're going to spend it in the U.S., where it's in the low 20% range. We have more money back to our bottom line. We can develop more products, launch more business units, hire more people, reinvest those profits. It's pretty simple math, folks. It's pretty simple math. You don't need to be an economic genius. You don't need an MBA or a PhD in economics to get this. When you let individuals and companies keep more of their own money, they're not going to all of a sudden become irresponsible and greedy when they've never been irresponsible and greedy. They're going to invest that money. They're going to help people with that money. But that's a story the left can never tell you, because the left has been painting them as evil boogeymen for years, who, if you give them more of their own money, if you let them keep more of their own money, they're going to give it to their greedy CEOs and crush the poor, when nothing could be further from the truth. And what happens when the private sector and private individuals keep more of their own money, and with that money they invest, they create businesses, they create jobs, they hire, they're charitable, they donate to charity, they donate to their churches, to their synagogues. What happens? Well, people become less dependent on government. People don't need government as much. Government becomes smaller. And philosophies like that of the Democratic Party, the progressives, the radicals, the socialists go extinct. And so they're fighting for their lives. The progressives are, the Democrats are. They're fighting for their lives and using their cronies in the mainstream media to do it. Now, if you thought that the Washington Post was bad, wait till we go over to CNN. CNN is by far and away my favorite, and there's a line in here that I was laughing at this morning when I read it. Over at CNN, the headline is, Trump pushes America first in Davos in wake of report he tried to fire Mueller. Now, there's another bogus report out of the Washington Post today that back in June, Donald Trump told White House counsel Don McGahn he was going to fire Robert Mueller, and Don McGahn threatened to resign, causing Trump to back down. Except the sourcing is limited to a person and people familiar with the episode, meaning someone sitting in a diner 3 blocks from the White House could have overheard 2 White House staffers saying, "Hey, I heard this morning that Trump wanted to fire Mueller and McGahn threatened to resign." "Oh, yeah? Who told you, Dave?" "Oh, you know that guy who works in the Uniformed Secret Service? I heard him telling an agent about it." And this is a big deal. And a Washington Post reporter sitting at the booth next to these 2 guys and reports it as people familiar with, he asked them a question about it, and it's now people familiar with the episode. Give me a break with this sourcing. The story also goes on to say that Don McGahn never actually told the president he wanted to resign. So other people heard what might have happened, and third, fourth, fifth party, it got back to the New York Times. Now, I was reading you it was a New York Times story originally. The Washington Post repurposed it for almost word for word. But it's ridiculous. Trump himself looks into the cameras in Davos and says, "Fake news, folks, fake news." And that part is relevant to the CNN story. The CNN is now pushing something that never happened, because even if parts of the story were true, Trump never fired Mueller. So CNN and the New York Times today, and now CNN, made headlines out of something that never even happened. Well, that's a literal definition of fake news, right? But let's read a little bit about the CNN story. CNN says, Trump did not address the bombshell report that he had tried to fire Robert Mueller. Now, that's a lie. I'm going to go right here on record on my show and say CNN is lying. That is fake news, the literal definition of fake news. Trump looked at the cameras in Davos, there's a record of it, all over the media, all over the web, and said, "Fake news, folks, fake news," when asked about the report that he tried to fire Mueller. So CNN is caught in a lie. In a lie. And if the story was published before Trump said it, CNN should have corrected it and updated it to reflect Trump's statement. Of course, they didn't. So we're going to give them a lie on this one. We're going to mark them for a lie and call it fake news. But here's my favorite. Trump did not address the bombshell report that he had tried to fire Robert Mueller, who is investigating alleged collusion between Trump, the Trump campaign, and Russia, blah, blah, blah. There was no collusion. Mueller would have found it. Instead, he stuck closely to a script that emphasized favorable conditions for making money in the United States. The President of the United States at the World Economic Forum spoke about doing business in the United States and better conditions now for profitability. And CNN is annoyed that instead of doing that at the World Economic Forum, he didn't talk about gossip from June that never actually even happened, about an incident that never actually even happened. That's what the mainstream media is hysterical about. That's what the mainstream media, CNN, is hysterical about, that the president did his job in Switzerland. It would be funny if it wasn't so tragic. Now, I want to read you another story from the New York Times today, unrelated. Now, tomorrow is International Holocaust Remembrance Day. So, of course, the New York Times editorial board had to slam Trump again and imply he was anti-Semitic, the guy who has been an amazing ally to Israel, the guy who Bibi Netanyahu praises night and day. They're good personal friends. They're great allies. Most notably, Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and has ordered the State Department to move our embassy there. Israel has had no greater friend in the White House in a long, long time. But let me tell you what the New York Times is upset about. You ready for this? Unlike previous presidents, Mr. Trump couldn't be bothered on a July visit to Warsaw to stop at the site of that city's notorious Jewish ghetto. Now, we don't know what he had planned with European leaders, what he had planned with the Polish president. We don't know about security conditions. We don't know if the Secret Service said, look, it's not a good idea this trip, we'll go next trip. We don't know. But it gets better. In May, he visited the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial in Jerusalem, but offended some people, anonymous, random people. Probably the New York Times pool reporter who was with him was the only one offended because he was looking for something to be offended by, or she was. And why did Donald Trump offend? Why did he offend some people at the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial in Jerusalem? Well, he zipped by the museum. He zipped by through the museum too quickly, or the memorial too quickly. It says he offended some people by zipping through it far too quickly to absorb its poignancy and power. So now, if you don't follow or you don't operate at a pace that the New York Times editorial board deems appropriate, and with regards to Trump, no pace would be appropriate. If he went too slow, they would say he was distracted. If he went too fast, he didn't care. You're somehow anti-Semitic, you hate the Jews, and you hate Israel. But it gets better. Then he signed the guest book with a discordantly but typically self-referential entry. Quote, "It is a great honor to be here with all of my friends. So amazing and will never forget." And think about that. For the New York Times, the president of the United States visiting a Holocaust memorial, but not walking as slowly as they would like him to, that's proof of anti-Semitism and Nazi leanings. But then signing the guest book, it is a great honor to be here. I'm the President of the United States, and I am honored to be with you, with all of my friends, the Jewish people, the Israeli people, the government of Israel, Netanyahu, my friends. I will never forget it. It's so amazing. That's considered disrespectful to the New York Times. That is why we laugh at them. That is why we call them fake news. Now, in New York Times speak, if I'm honored to be with you, if I consider you my friend, if I find the experience amazing and something I'll never forget, that's self-referential and disrespectful. And also indicative of the fact that the president is a Nazi, a hater of Jews around the world, and just a generally horrible human being. And this is what we on the right are trying to fight every single day. This stupidity, this insanity. It's absolutely ridiculous. But thank God for outlets like the Washington Post, CNN, and the New York Times. They do our job for us because I can call out the fake news every day, but man, they put it into print. If you like this really important content as much as I absolutely love bringing it to you, please subscribe to our premium service at www.therebel.media/shows. If you're already a subscriber, thank you very, very much. And don't forget to check out my new hour-long show, Off the Cuff, Declassified. I guarantee you're going to love it. We go much deeper into all this great stuff. I have on great guests every day. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next week.